Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
It looks like this is about to come to a head. After months of battling with the Homeowners Association, I'm staring down the possibility of being kicked out. Honestly, at this point it might be the best outcome for me. But let me back up and explain how this mess started, because it's been a wild ride. It all began when I joined the HOA board a couple of years ago. I thought it would be a good way to get involved in the community and make sure things were running smoothly. Turns out I couldn't have been more mistaken. From the very first meeting, I could tell something was off. The financial reports were vague, the minutes from previous meetings were incomplete, and there was this general sense of secrecy that made me uneasy. I asked questions, reasonable ones I thought, about where the money was going and why certain decisions were being made. But instead of answers, I got pushback. A lot of pushback. One of the board members, a guy named Greg, was particularly defensive. He had this way of talking down to people, like he was the only one who knew how things should be run. When I brought up the financial discrepancies, he crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair, his tone dripping with condescension. "We've been doing things this way for years," he said, like that was supposed to justify everything. "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." I could feel the frustration building as I tried to explain why transparency mattered, but Greg just rolled his eyes and cut me off. "You're new here," he said, as if that somehow invalidated my concerns. "You don't understand how things work. We're volunteers, not accountants. We don't have time to micromanage every little detail." It was clear he didn't want to hear it, and the rest of the board seemed content to follow his lead. That was the moment I realized how deep the problems ran. They weren't just careless, they were willfully ignorant. "But how do we know it's not broke if we don't have all the information?" I asked, trying to keep my tone calm. Though it was getting harder by the minute. "I just think we should be transparent about where the funds are going. If we're handling other people's money, we owe it to them to be clear about how it's being used." Greg rolled his eyes, like I was some naive outsider who didn't understand how the real world worked. "Transparency is great in theory," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "but it's not always practical. We're volunteers, not accountants. We don't have the time or the expertise to dig through every little detail. This isn't some Fortune 500 company, it's a neighborhood HOA. I could feel the tension in the room as I pushed back. "I get that we're volunteers, but that doesn't mean we can ignore basic accountability. If we're responsible for managing funds, we need to make sure everything is above board. It's not about being perfect, it's about being honest." Greg leaned forward, his expression hardening. "Look, we've been doing this for years without any issues. If you want to play detective, go ahead, but don't expect the rest of us to drop everything because you've got a problem with how things are run." His tone made it clear he wasn't interested in hearing anything else I had to say. The rest of the board sat quietly, avoiding eye contact, and I realized just how much of an uphill battle this was going to be. That didn't sit right with me. So I started digging. I requested access to the financial records, and after weeks of back and forth, I finally got my hands on them. What I found was shocking. Funds had been misappropriated, taxes hadn't been filed properly, and there were gaps in the records that couldn't be explained. It was a mess. I brought my findings to the board, thinking they'd want to address the issues immediately. Instead, they turned on me. "You're overstepping," said Linda, the board president. "This is not how we do things here." Overstepping? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My voice rose slightly despite my efforts to stay calm. "I'm trying to make sure we're following the law. If we don't fix this, we could all be in trouble. This isn't about me causing problems, it's about protecting the entire association from legal consequences. Do you really want to risk fines or worse because we didn't address these issues?" Linda, the board president, just stared at me like I was speaking another language. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said, her tone dismissive. "We've managed things just fine for years without all this drama. If you keep pushing, you're only going to cause more problems for yourself." Her words felt like a threat, and it was clear they were more interested in protecting their own interests than doing what was right. The room was tense, and I could feel the weight of their collective disapproval, but I wasn't backing down. If they wanted to bury their heads in the sand, that was on them, but I wasn't going to let them drag me down with them. But they didn't want to hear it. Instead, they started retaliating. They made it difficult for me to attend meetings, ignored my emails, and even tried to block me from accessing records. When I pushed back, they accused me of being disruptive. Then things took a darker turn. I have a disability, and they started using that against me. They claimed I wasn't fit to serve on the board because of my condition. It was blatant discrimination, and it was infuriating. At that point, I knew I couldn't let this go. I filed a fair housing complaint with the state, and they stepped in to investigate. The state asked me for settlement ideas that would make me feel whole, so I proposed two options. The first was receivership until the association was in legal operating shape, along with 2 decades of financial and policy audits and mandatory training for board members. I know it sounds extreme, but given the state of things, it felt necessary. The second option was to kick out the 3 lots that live outside the private gated road, including mine. That was based on advice from the association's own attorney, which I found in a letter from when I was on the board. I even offered to pay the legal fees to make it happen. Last night, I got a letter from the association. They're offering to expel our lots. They still need to vote on it, but given the cost of the alternative and the small size of the association, less than 25 members, I don't think there will be an issue. Honestly, I'm relieved. Being part of this HOA has been nothing but a headache, and the thought of being free from it is almost too good to be true. But it hasn't been easy. I'm $12,000 deep in legal fees, and by the time this is over, it'll probably be closer to $20,000. It's a lot of money, but to me it's worth it. Removing my 8.6-acre lot from an HOA that's 2 to 3 years away from being surrounded by housing developments, priceless. Still, there's a part of me that's angry that it had to come to this, angry that the people who were supposed to be looking out for the community were so careless and corrupt, and angry that I had to fight so hard just to get them to do the right thing. The other day, I ran into Greg at the local hardware store. He was picking up some mulch, and I was grabbing a few things for a project around the house. We locked eyes, and for a moment neither of us said anything. Then he broke the silence. "So, I hear you're getting your wish," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, gripping the handle of my shopping cart a little tighter. "You wanted out, didn't you? Well, congratulations. You're getting what you wanted." I shook my head. "This isn't about what I wanted, Greg. This is about holding people accountable. You know as well as I do that things were a mess. I was just trying to fix it," he snorted. "Fix it? You've caused nothing but trouble since you joined the board. Maybe now we can get back to normal." "Normal?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You call what was going on normal? Missing records, misappropriated funds, discrimination? That's your idea of normal?" Greg's face turned red, and he took a step closer to me. "You don't know what you're talking about. You come in here acting like you're better than everyone else, and now you're tearing the whole place apart." "I'm not tearing anything apart," I shot back. "I'm just shining a light on what's already broken. If you can't handle that, maybe you're part of the problem." He didn't have a response to that. Instead, he just glared at me for a moment before turning on his heel and walking away. I stood there for a minute, my heart racing before heading to the checkout. The encounter left a bad taste in my mouth, but it also reinforced why I'm fighting this battle. Someone has to hold these people accountable, even if it's not easy. As I drove home, I thought about what's next. The association still has to vote on the expulsion, but I'm not holding my breath for a fair process. They've shown time and time again that they're more interested in protecting themselves than doing what's right. But no matter what happens, I'm not backing down. I've come too far to give up now. When I got home, I sat down at my desk and pulled out the letter from the association. I read it over again, trying to make sense of their offer. On the surface, it seems like a win, getting out of the HOA and being free from their rules and regulations. But there's a part of me that wonders if I'm letting them off too easy. If I walk away now, will they ever face real consequences for what they've done? Or will they just keep doing the same things, only now without me there to call them out? I don't have the answers yet, but I do know this. The fight isn't over, not by a long shot. And no matter what happens, I'm not going to let them sweep this under the rug. They may have the power now, but I've got the truth on my side. And in the end, that's what matters. The paperwork to remove my lot from the HOA has officially started, but it's not over yet. My lawyer made it clear that while the expulsion is moving forward, we're not done fighting. The board thought they could just push me out and sweep everything under the rug, but they underestimated how far I'm willing to take this. My lawyer has already filed requests to have the board investigated for corruption, and it's been passed off to the appropriate government agencies. The state tax authorities are now involved, and from what I've heard, they're not messing around. The board is losing their minds over this. Greg called me yesterday, his voice shaking with anger. "You just can't let it go, can you? You're out. What more do you want?" "I want accountability," I said, keeping my tone steady. "You don't get to mismanage funds, discriminate, and then act like none of it happened. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about making sure you can't do this to anyone else." He hung up on me, but I could almost feel the panic radiating through the phone. The board is scrambling now, trying to cover their tracks, but it's too late. The state is already digging into their finances, and the tax people are breathing down their necks. I've heard rumors that some of the board members are considering resigning, but even that won't save them at this point. Meanwhile, my lawyer is pushing for the HOA to cover my legal fees. They're resisting, of course, but with the state involved, they don't have much of a leg to stand on. It's satisfying to watch them squirm, but I know this isn't over. They're going to fight back harder now that they're backed into a corner, and I need to be ready for whatever comes next. The board's attorney sent over a strongly worded letter yesterday, accusing me of unnecessarily escalating the situation. I laughed when I read it. Unnecessarily? They're the ones who turned this into a war by retaliating instead of fixing their mistakes. Now they're facing the consequences, and they don't like it one bit. I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but I do know this. I'm not backing down. The state is involved, the tax authorities are involved, and the board is finally being held accountable. It's a mess, but it's their mess, not mine, and for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally getting somewhere. In my case, my HOA does not indemnify the board members, but we did have D&O insurance. The board members repeatedly violated their fiduciary duties and were involved in self-dealing. I threatened to sue them all personally. They turned it over to the insurance company, who didn't care about their conduct but was eager to settle with me quickly. The part about the HOA failing to file taxes and misusing funds is what really gets me. How can you be in charge of managing community money and not even follow basic legal requirements? It's not just incompetence, it's negligence. And then when someone tries to fix it, they get pushed out. That's so backwards. I can't believe they're offering to expel the lots instead of actually addressing the problems. It's like they're admitting they're too corrupt to fix anything, so they'd rather just cut people loose. And the fact that the state had to step in says everything. This isn't just a bad HOA, it's a systemic failure. I feel for the person who had to deal with this. Spending thousands of dollars and countless hours just to get some basic accountability is ridiculous. HOAs need more oversight, period. Stories like this make me wonder if they should even exist in the first place. What really stands out to me is the discrimination angle. The fact that the HOA board used someone's disability as a weapon to silence them is beyond reprehensible. It's one thing to mismanage funds or fail to file taxes. Those are serious issues, but at least they're fixable. Discrimination, though, that's a whole different level of messed up. It shows how desperate they were to protect themselves, even if it meant attacking someone's character and livelihood. And let's not forget, this all started because someone was trying to do the right thing. The board's response wasn't just unprofessional, it was downright cruel. I can't imagine how frustrating it must be to fight for basic fairness and transparency, only to be met with retaliation and hostility. The fact that the state had to get involved just proves how out of control this HOA is. Honestly, I hope this story inspires more people to speak up when they see wrongdoing in their own communities. HOAs have way too much power, and stories like this show exactly why that's a problem. If anything, this should be a wake-up call for stricter regulations and oversight. No one should have to go through this kind of ordeal just to hold their HOA accountable.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.